All right, welcome everyone. Today, we're going to tackle a really fascinating thought experiment. Imagine a peace conference, but the guest list includes some of history's greatest minds. What would they have to say? Our goal is to dive into their thinking to understand how we might actually design a world that's built to last.
And let's kick things off with this powerful idea from Dag Hammarskjöld. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of restraint. Just let that sink in for a second. This totally reframes the whole conversation, doesn't it? Peace isn't some passive utopian state where nothing bad ever happens. No, it's an active choice. It's an ongoing discipline of holding back, of choosing restraint, especially when conflict is staring you right in the face.
So, how do we get there? Well, our journey today is going to move through 5 key areas. We'll start with the big picture, the challenge of peace, and then zoom right into the inner battlefield of the human mind. From there, we'll look at justice and power, then pull back to see how systems and identity play a role, and finally, we'll bring it all together by considering our own final responsibility.
Okay, first up, the challenge of peace. Now, what's so interesting about the thinkers we're drawing from is that they don't see this as just a political problem. They frame it as a problem of human development, a failure, really, of our collective maturity.
Hammarskjöld really hits this home. He argues that our biggest conflicts come from this massive gap, a gap between what we can do with our amazing technology and power and the wisdom we actually need to handle them responsibly. It's not a policy problem. It's a maturity problem.
And this idea of immaturity leads us directly from that huge global scale right down to the individual. I mean, if war is a failure of maturity on a grand scale, then the roots of that conflict have to be somewhere inside the human mind. So that brings us to our second section, the inner battlefield and the really tough question of why we always seem to need enemies.
This is really the central question here, and it's a deep one. We all know logically that cooperation is almost always the better path. So why do we keep falling back into these destructive patterns of us versus them? What's going on? Well, the philosopher Hannah Arendt offers an answer that is chillingly simple. She says it's because thinking is hard. Creating an enemy is just a mental shortcut. It saves us from doing the difficult, messy, nuanced work of actually thinking for ourselves. Instead, you get a simple story with a clear bad guy and a convenient target for all your problems.
And then Carl Jung comes in and adds this whole other psychological layer. He suggests that the enemy we see out there is often just a projection of our own darkness, the stuff about ourselves we refuse to look at. He called it the shadow. We don't want to face our own flaws, so we just plaster them onto someone else, magnified and monstrous.
And this inner drift toward war has real, observable warning signs. You can see it when language gets hollowed out, replaced by empty slogans. You see it when complex realities get flattened into simple myths of good versus evil. You see it when compassion is suddenly mocked as a weakness, and all that collective pain and suffering gets funneled into blaming some other. These are the psychological cracks that appear long before the first shot is ever fired. Now, these individual psychological patterns, they don't just stay inside our heads. They scale up and they shape our entire societies. So from that inner world, let's zoom back out to our third section, justice and power. You see, after a conflict ends, a society faces this huge fork in the road. Do you pursue a path that heals or one that just hardens the divisions for the next generation?
And the choice is it's so stark. Accountability is about restoring society. It's about upholding the dignity of everyone involved. Revenge, on the other hand, is all about humiliation. It solves nothing. It just traps the future, traps the next generation in the exact same cycle of violence. I mean, Nelson Mandela is the ultimate example of this choice. He knew that for South Africa to even survive, to have a future, the goal couldn't be about punishing the past. It had to be about truth and about restoring dignity for everyone. And let's be clear, this wasn't just some lofty, nice idea. It was a hardcore strategy for survival.
This also applies directly to leadership. There's a very fine line between legitimate authority, which every society needs to function, and destructive domination. So how do we know when that line has been crossed?
Well, the signs of this decay are pretty clear. It's happening when leaders start operating in secret instead of being accountable. It's happening when speaking the truth becomes a dangerous act. You see it when governments pass more and more laws, but social trust just keeps going down. When obedience is gained, but at the cost of people's dignity, that's when you know. Authority is rotting into domination. All right, let's pull the camera back one last time to the biggest scale of all, our global systems and our sense of identity. This is really about making that leap from thinking like a tribe to thinking like a planet.
Now, here's a really challenging idea. What if war isn't just caused by bad people doing bad things? What if, a lot of the time, it's actually a design failure? What if our economic, ecological, and social structures are just badly designed, unintentionally engineered to produce scarcity, desperation, and conflict? This is exactly what Buckminster Fuller was getting at. He said you don't fix war by fighting people, you fix it by redesigning the system. Now that reframes peace as not just a moral quest, but as an engineering challenge. It means we have to actually look at the blueprints of our society and ask, is this thing designed for cooperation or is it designed for conflict? And Martin Luther King Jr. connects this systemic failure right back to identity. He argued that tribalism, that retreat into our little us versus them camps, isn't just some primitive instinct we can't shake. No, he saw it as a completely rational response to living in a system that denies people their basic dignity and justice. And you start to notice how the warning signs on this huge systemic level sound an awful lot like the psychological ones we saw earlier. It's when efficiency is valued more than humanity, when the damage caused by a system is totally invisible to the people who benefit from it, when compassion becomes conditional, only for our people, and when law starts to serve the tribe instead of real justice. These are all signs that our structures are shrinking our humanity, not expanding it.
So this brings us to our final section, where we try to bring all these ideas together. After looking at the self, at society, and at our global systems, what is our final responsibility in this great project of building peace? And this is where this massive abstract topic comes right back down to our daily lives. You see, peace isn't only forged in big treaties and grand historic gestures, it's built in the small, quiet, everyday choices that we all make. The choice to think critically, the choice to show restraint, the choice to actually listen to someone, and the choice to connect.
And as Hammarskjöld concluded, our legacy won't be judged by the beautiful ideals we talked about. It's going to be judged by the difficult limits we were willing to accept, the limits we put on our own power, on our thirst for vengeance, and on our capacity for indifference.
Which leaves us with this final, powerful thought. Peace isn't a destination we just arrive at. It's not some final state of perfection. It is a discipline. It's something we have to actively and consciously practice every single day at every level of our lives.